The fluorescent lights in the high school front office flickered like they couldn't decide whether to stay alive. It was nearly 8:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, well past school hours, and the hallway outside had gone dark except for the pale orange glow leaking in from the streetlights. A janitor's radio crackled faintly from the other end of the hall. Inside, seated on a green plastic chair with her arms folded across her chest and her eyes fixed on the tile floor, was a girl, maybe 15, maybe younger. Her jeans were torn at the knees, not fashionably but accidentally, and her oversized sweatshirt swallowed her thin frame. Her name was Emma. Behind the desk, Mrs. Raines, the school secretary, pursed her lips as she tapped the phone cradle repeatedly, clearly agitated. Still no answer at home, she said to the man standing across from her. No emergency contacts either. I've called 3 times. We can't just keep her here. The man nodded slowly, not answering at first. Tom Weaver, a substitute custodian, hired just 3 months ago after getting laid off from his job at the auto parts warehouse, rubbed the back of his neck. His steel-toe boots creaked slightly on the vinyl floor. His eyes shifted between the secretary and the girl. Emma hadn't spoken much. She barely looked up. She wasn't a troublemaker, but something about her silence was louder than words. It was a silence Tom recognized, like the kind that settled in his son's room after his wife passed away. "She say what happened?" he asked, his voice rough, like gravel underfoot. Mrs. Raines sighed. She missed the bus. Again. No one came to pick her up. She won't explain why. She looked at Tom, pointedly. Technically, the school isn't liable after 8 p.m. Tom looked at Emma. Her hand clutched the frayed strap of her backpack, like a lifeline. She had one foot tucked under her thigh, trying to stay warm. "Let her stay with me tonight," Tom said. The words came out before he'd even fully thought them through. Mrs. Raines blinked. "Excuse me. I've got a couch. Clean place. My son's home. Same age." He paused. "It's just one night." Mrs. Raines narrowed her eyes, then raised both eyebrows in disbelief. "That's not protocol. I'll sign whatever you need. Just seems wrong to leave her here like that." His tone was calm, quiet, but unwavering. Emma glanced up for the first time. Her eyes were pale blue, like worn denim, soft but guarded. There was a flicker of surprise there, and something else. Hope, maybe. Just the beginning of it. A long silence stretched between them all. The phone rang. Mrs. Raines jumped for it, only to frown. Telemarketer. She hung up hard, muttering. Another gust of wind shook the glass doors. Outside, the street was empty. No headlights. No one coming. Tom reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He set it on the counter, then placed his driver's license beside it. "Look me up. I've got nothing to hide." Mrs. Raines sighed. "If I lose my job over this, it's on you." He nodded once. "That's fair." Another beat passed. Then she slid a clipboard across the counter. "Write your name, time of departure, and keep your phone on." Tom turned to Emma. "Come on. You okay walking out with me?" She hesitated, but then she stood up, slung her backpack over one shoulder, and followed him. Outside, as they walked through the cold parking lot under the humming streetlights, Emma spoke softly for the first time. "You don't even know who I am." Tom glanced at her. "Nope." She looked at the ground, her hair falling across her cheek. "You're still helping me?" He nodded. "Everyone's somebody's kid. That's enough for me." The wind whipped past them, kicking leaves across the blacktop like forgotten memories. She didn't say another word. But that night, in the quiet of a small 2-bedroom house with cracked drywall and a leaky faucet, something began that neither of them could have predicted. A story about kindness that would soon turn into a national scandal. But we'll get to that. First, let's rewind a little. Take a breath, and stay with us. Tom Weaver's house sat at the edge of town, a humble 1-story ranch tucked between a boarded-up barbershop and an overgrown vacant lot. The siding peeled a little on the north side, and the front steps creaked when stepped on wrong, but it was solid. Real. Just like him. Tom was the kind of man most people didn't notice unless he was fixing something they broke. Mid-40s, prematurely gray at the temples, hands like sandpaper from decades of manual labor. Since his wife passed 3 years ago, pancreatic cancer, swift and cruel, he'd taken a night shift janitor job to be home during the day with his son, Mason, who was now 16 and quietly navigating his own grief through earbuds and sketchbooks. Tom was used to being overlooked. At school, the teachers rarely greeted him. In town, folks still called him that guy who used to run the auto shop, even though the shop had gone under during COVID and never reopened. But he didn't complain. He kept his head down and did the work, always the work. Emma, on the other hand, wasn't from around here. Not really. She'd only been attending Grantville High for a few weeks. No one knew much about her, other than she never smiled and always seemed to be dropped off late, or not at all. Rumors swirled around her, the way they do in small towns: runaway, foster kid, maybe even homeless. She never corrected them. And then there was Principal Landon Coyle. Landon wore authority like a badge, literally. He kept a school security lanyard clipped to his belt at all times, though he rarely left his office. A former college football coach turned administrator, he believed in order over emotion and used phrases like zero tolerance with the pride of a man quoting scripture. To Coyle, kids like Emma were problems waiting to happen. To him, Tom was just a custodian who shouldn't get involved in student affairs. Which is why, the next morning, when Emma arrived at school clean, fed, and in a fresh pair of Mason sweatpants, Coyle's jaw visibly tensed. "You took her home?" he repeated, as if Tom had admitted to grand larceny. "She had nowhere to go," Tom replied evenly. "Just wanted to make sure she was safe." "That's not your call," Coyle snapped. "That's for Child Protective Services. Protocol exists for a reason, Mr. Weaver." Tom met his gaze, quiet but unflinching. So does human decency. The tension in the office crackled like a live wire. Across the hallway, a few teachers pretended not to overhear, but one, Miss Kendra Blake, a young English teacher with a cautious heart and quiet sense of justice, watched carefully. She didn't speak then, but later, she would. For now, Tom walked away, back to his mop and his bucket, while Emma was sent to class, without a single question about her well-being. Injustice didn't always wear sirens or carry headlines. Sometimes, it just wore a pressed shirt, a plastic badge, and a practiced frown. But something was shifting, quietly, like a train starting up in the distance. And no one, not Coyle, not the town, had any idea where it was headed. By Friday, the whispers had spread like spilled coffee on a white rug. "Did you hear? The janitor took a girl home. Isn't that the new kid? The quiet one. I bet there's more to it." Gotta be. Grantville High was a small-town school with big-town gossip. The cafeteria was a rumor mill, and Emma sat in the eye of the storm, alone at a corner table, picking at a stale tuna sandwich. She kept her hood up and her gaze low. Principal Coyle watched the cafeteria from the doorway like a warden surveying a yard. His eyes flicked to Emma, then to Tom, who was quietly wheeling a mop bucket across the back tile floor. He narrowed his eyes. Something about Tom's calm rattled him, like he wasn't following the script. Later that day, Tom was summoned to the front office again. This time, he wasn't met with concern. It was accusation. "We've received a complaint," Coyle said, tapping a manila folder on the table. "An anonymous tip to the district about inappropriate boundaries with a student." Tom froze. Not outwardly. He kept still, like a statue made of restraint. But inside, something twisted. "That's not what happened," he said. Voice low, controlled. Coyle leaned in, his tie too tight around his thick neck. "Doesn't matter what you say. What matters is how this looks. And right now, it looks bad." "Bad for who?" "For this school. For me. For you. If you don't watch yourself." Tom felt his jaw tighten. "So next time a kid's stranded after dark, I just lock the door and pretend I didn't see her?" Coyle smirked. "Next time, you call me." Tom nodded once, slow, like he understood something about the man in front of him. But he didn't speak. Not yet. He left the office with more eyes on him than usual. Some staff looked at him with pity. Others, with doubt. No one said a word. That night, he skipped dinner. Mason noticed. "You okay?" his son asked from the couch, his sketchbook resting in his lap. "Just tired," Tom muttered, but the lie sat heavy in the room. In the next room, Emma helped wash the dishes. She didn't say much, but she watched Tom closely. She noticed things, like how his hands trembled slightly when he dried a plate, or how he kept checking his phone like he was waiting for bad news. "You shouldn't have helped me," she said finally. He looked over, surprised. "Why's that?" "People don't get in trouble when they don't care. But you did. Now you will." Tom didn't answer for a while. The kitchen faucet dripped steadily, marking the seconds between them. Then he said, "I'd rather be in trouble for doing the right thing than safe for looking the other way." Emma blinked fast, turned her face slightly. She wouldn't cry, not in front of anyone. The next morning, the tension boiled over. Tom walked into school and found his closet, the little janitor's storage room at the far end of the west hallway, had been cleared out. His mop, his cart, his personal toolbox, all gone. In its place was a pink slip taped to the inside of the door. Administrative leave, pending investigation. No warning, no meeting, just silence. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the paper. Ms. Blake walked by and stopped mid-stride. "What happened?" she asked. Tom held up the letter but didn't say a word. She looked at him, eyes wide. "They can't do that. Not without cause." "They are," he said softly. Emma didn't see him that day. The office said he was out for personal reasons. Mason heard the same rumor every other kid did, that his dad was in trouble. The halls buzzed with speculation, and Coyle walked through them like a man who believed himself untouchable. But in the distance, something had shifted, something Coyle didn't see coming. Because truth, when buried, doesn't die. It waits. And when it rises, it doesn't knock first. That afternoon, Tom sat alone at the local diner. Pete's Grill, the kind of place with cracked leather booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. A waitress named Jolene, who knew Tom from way back, poured him coffee without asking. "You look like someone just told you church was canceled and God skipped town," she said gently. Tom gave her a tired smile, but didn't respond. He stirred his coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream rise like smoke in a cold sky. He hadn't told Mason he'd been suspended. Not yet. The shame clawed at his chest like a wild animal, but beneath that shame was something stronger. Anger. Not loud, not violent, but steady, like water under rock. As the diner buzzed around him, clinking forks, murmuring voices, Tom drifted back to another life. Before the boiler rooms, before the school halls. He saw himself in a suit. Younger, cleaner, sitting in a downtown office with blueprints spread across the table. He'd been a mechanical engineer once, degree from Ohio State, magna cum laude, designed HVAC systems for hospitals, knew every type of duct and fan blade, every air pressure ratio. But after his wife got sick, everything changed. The insurance barely covered treatment. He took contract work, then warehouse jobs. Then the layoffs came, the debts, the foreclosure. He let it all go without complaint. Because grief doesn't leave room for ego. Now, people saw him as a janitor and nothing more. A man who pushed a mop and knew nothing about the world. And he let them believe that. Because it was easier, safer. But lately, he wasn't so sure silence was strength. Back at the school, Ms. Blake lingered in her classroom long after the bell rang. She stared at the whiteboard, lost in thought, until Emma appeared in the doorway. "You don't have to stay here," the girl said. "I know," Ms. Blake replied, brushing chalk dust from her skirt. "But some things bother me. Like watching someone good get punished." Emma stepped inside quietly. She hesitated, then said, "Mr. Weaver, he used to talk about fixing things, not janitor stuff. Real things, like building systems." Ms. Blake looked up. "What kind of systems?" "Cooling, circulation, airflow." He said if something wasn't moving right, it meant someone was about to get hurt. Ms. Blake's eyes widened just slightly. Emma nodded, almost to herself. "People think he's just quiet, but I think he's holding back." The room was still for a moment. Then Ms. Blake said softly, "Maybe it's time someone stopped underestimating him." Outside, night crept in again, painting the sky with dark velvet. In the silence of his living room, Tom sat with an old notebook in his lap. Inside were pages of equations, diagrams, and designs long forgotten by the world, but not by him. He stared at them, remembering who he used to be, not for nostalgia, but because he might need to become that man again. The school board meeting was packed. It wasn't the kind of event that usually drew a crowd, but that night, the cafeteria turned town hall had barely enough folding chairs. Teachers sat in the back, parents up front. Students hovered near the soda machine, pretending not to care. Principal Coyle stood confidently at the podium under a large felt banner that read, "Grantville, Excellence, Honor, Order." At the end of the long row of tables, Tom Weaver sat quietly. No one offered him a seat at the head table. He didn't ask for one. He wore the same jeans and flannel shirt he always did. His hair was neatly combed. His face unreadable. Next to him, Emma sat straight-backed, eyes focused, chin high. A lawyer had offered to speak for her, but she refused. Ms. Blake stood in the corner, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching everything. Coyle cleared his throat dramatically and addressed the microphone. We're here tonight to address a serious violation of district protocol. One of our staff members, he didn't say Tom's name, took it upon himself to shelter a minor overnight, without notifying administration, without parental consent. That action jeopardized the student's safety, the school's integrity, and our legal liability. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tom didn't move. Coyle pressed on. Our schools must operate by the rules. If anyone, any custodian, believes they are above policy, then chaos follows. That word, custodian, landed like a slap. He looked down at Tom, then smiled slightly. Would you like to speak, Mr. Weaver? Tom stood. He walked slowly to the podium. The room hushed. For a moment, he just looked out at the crowd. Then he held up a folded sheet of paper. This is the incident report you filed, Mr. Coyle, he began. It says I recklessly housed a vulnerable student without proper clearance. He set it down. Now here, he continued, pulling out a second sheet, is a certified transcript from Grantville County office. It confirms that Emma was not listed under any emergency contact system, nor was CPS able to provide shelter the night I found her sitting alone at the school entrance, after hours, in the dark, with no transportation, no guardian, and no supervision. A pause. I acted as a human being before I acted as an employee. A low rumble of agreement passed through the parents. Tom went on, steady and strong. What you don't know is that I have a degree in mechanical engineering. Spent 20 years managing air systems for high-risk buildings, hospitals, emergency centers, even prisons. I understand systems. I understand safety. And I understand what happens when one piece of the system fails. He turned slowly toward Coyle. You failed. You ignored a student who'd been stranded multiple times. You ignored your teachers when they raised concerns. You ignored the girl. Coyle's face had gone stiff. But Tom wasn't done. And one more thing, Tom added, pulling out a small card from his wallet. This is Emma's emergency contact information. It came in 2 days after the incident, delivered by courier. He handed it to the board chair. A few people leaned in to read. Emma Daniels, legal guardian. Melissa Daniels, CEO, Bluefield Technologies. The room exploded in whispers. Tom waited. Calm. Coyle blinked, confused. Wait, Bluefield? That's impossible. Emma stood up now. I didn't tell anyone who my mother is, she said evenly, because I didn't want to be treated different. She's been overseas for business. My stepfather left without notice. No one believed me when I said I had nowhere to go. She looked at Tom. Except him. The lawyer representing the school board leaned into his mic. So, you're telling us Mr. Weaver prevented what could have been a legal disaster? Tom shook his head. I just gave a kid a couch to sleep on and someone to talk to. That shouldn't be heroic. That should be normal. A beat of silence. Then someone clapped. Slowly. Another joined in. Then a few more. By the time half the room stood applauding, Coyle's face was crimson. The board chair leaned over to whisper something to Coyle, too quietly to hear. Coyle stiffened, then stood up and walked out, jaw clenched, not saying a word. Tom stepped away from the mic, face still calm. But inside, something long dormant stirred awake. Not pride, just peace. After the meeting, Emma walked out into the cool night air and looked up at the stars. Tom followed a few steps behind. She turned to him. You didn't have to do all that. He gave a small shrug. Didn't feel like much. Just told the truth. She nodded, then said softly, You were the first person who saw me without assuming I was broken. Tom looked out at the horizon. You're not broken, Emma. You were just waiting for someone to stop walking past. 3 weeks later, the hallway floors gleamed. Tom Weaver stood at the end of the east corridor, arms crossed, watching two younger maintenance workers buff the tile with a new ride-on floor polisher. The machine hummed smoothly, shining the wax to a mirror finish. Not bad, Tom said with a faint smile. You missed a spot near the water fountain, though. The taller worker looked up, grinning. We're getting there, boss. Boss. The word still sounded strange. Tom had been officially promoted to facilities director, a new position the school board created after a policy restructuring. His responsibilities now included staff oversight, safety planning, and, at the board's urging, advising on crisis protocol. Improvements. He had a new badge, but he still brought his old mop with him, just in case. The town had changed, too, just a little. Parents he didn't even know had stopped him at the grocery store. Some shook his hand. Others hugged him awkwardly. One offered him a free tire rotation at his shop. Another brought him a plate of banana bread. Ms. Blake had invited him to speak at the next teacher development day. Even Mason, who barely talked about anything, had drawn a sketch of his dad standing in front of the school, mop in one hand, blueprint in the other. It now hung on the fridge. And as for Emma, she was staying. After a tense week of legal wrangling, her mother, Melissa Daniels, flew in from her company's West Coast office. She didn't arrive in a limo. She came in a rental sedan, no makeup, and a tearful apology for missing too much, for trusting the wrong people, for not being there when her daughter needed her most. But Emma had already found a safe place. Melissa thanked Tom in person, offered him a job at Bluefield Technologies, head of facilities, for the entire company campus in Chicago. Tom politely declined. "I've got something good right here," he said. Principal Landon Coyle didn't go down quietly. At first, he tried to spin the narrative, claimed he was following procedure, that the board had rushed judgment. But it didn't matter. The district voted to terminate his contract. On his final day, he packed his office alone. No one helped him, not even the assistant principal, who had once idolized him. Tom passed him in the hallway on his way to fix a classroom air vent. Coyle didn't meet his eyes, just kept walking, head down, cardboard box in hand. Tom didn't say a word. Some defeats don't need an audience. On a breezy Thursday afternoon, Emma stood outside the school near the flagpole, holding a paper certificate in her hand. It was Student of the Month. Ms. Blake had nominated her for courage, resilience, and showing us what empathy looks like. Tom met her at the curb in his beat-up pickup truck, window rolled down. Emma climbed in slowly, still staring at the certificate. "Didn't think they gave awards for surviving," she muttered. "They don't," Tom said, turning the key. "They give them for teaching the rest of us how." She looked at him for a moment, then smiled. "The real kind. The kind that starts in the eyes, before it reaches the mouth." "I think I'm ready to go home," she said. Tom nodded. "You already are." Back at the house, Mason was setting the table for dinner. Chili simmered on the stove, and classic rock hummed from the old radio. It smelled like onions and comfort. 3 plates sat on the table now. A family, not by blood, but by choice. And somewhere, beneath the silence, a new story was beginning. Not one of pity, not of scandal, but of belonging. Because sometimes, the quietest people carry the strongest truths. And sometimes, the smallest acts, like offering a couch to a lost girl, can shake the tallest walls. 1 year later, the school looked different now. Not on the outside, still the same red brick walls and squeaky doors, but inside, things had shifted. The culture, the heart. There was a new protocol in place for after-school emergencies. Every student had at least 3 verified emergency contacts. Teachers were trained in trauma-informed response. And once a month, the school hosted something called Open Chair Night, a free dinner where students, staff, and families could sit, talk, and just be. At the center of it all was Tom Weaver. He still wore jeans and steel-toe boots, still kept a rag tucked in his belt. But he wasn't invisible anymore. He was now head of student support services, a title they made up for a job no one else could do. He fixed broken locks, sure, but he also fixed something else, the gap between who we see and who we listen to. Emma was thriving. Her mom had relocated the family to Grantville permanently, trading boardrooms for something real. Emma now ran the school's peer mentorship program, helping kids who felt like ghosts in the halls find their voices again. She was no longer the girl in the back row. She was the one speaking up. Mason had just been accepted into an arts program in the city. On his final school project, he submitted a mural, 6 feet tall, of his father, standing in a beam of golden light, holding a mop in one hand and a set of blueprints in the other. At the bottom, it read, "He didn't clean up messes. He made space for others to heal." And as for Landon Coyle, last anyone heard, he was working security at a private golf club out near Route 18. Still wore a lanyard, still barked about order. But no one was listening. Because his legacy wasn't built on trust. It was built on fear. And fear never lasts. People like Tom do. Because Tom wasn't trying to be a hero. He just couldn't look away when someone needed help. And in a world that teaches us to protect ourselves first, that kind of selfless kindness is heroic. It's rare. It's powerful. And it's possible. So here's what this story teaches us. Sometimes, the quietest people are the ones who change everything. Sometimes, the kids everyone overlooks carry the heaviest burdens. And sometimes, our greatest trials lead us to the truth. That doing the right thing might cost you something, but it gives someone else everything they need to survive. If this story moved you, share it. Pass it on. Let someone know they matter. Be the person who notices. Be the one who stays. Because one night, a girl was left behind, and one man chose not to walk away. That's how change begins. With one ordinary act of courage.